time. And one of the things is we're celebrating Thanksgiving this weekend. And there is so much that we have to be thankful for. For example, I was praying and wishing I had air conditioning all week. Just to sleep in for 10 minutes. Because the humidity was such that if you had a sheet on, you rolled over, the sheet went with you. When you stood up, it literally would stick to you. It was that kind of a thing. We have so many amenities that we take for granted. And hot water. I was just talking to Isaac and Christine, and I said, isn't hot water righteous? Because we had zero hot water. And that doesn't sound like anything new, but cold water, when you're getting up at 4:30, 5:30 in the morning every morning, dude, I mean, you want to scream, but they would have made fun of me. Food, just the options you have to eat. I'll just throw this, healthcare. We saw people this week who had never, ever had time with the doctor. Were you the one taking history? Somebody was taking histories, one of our people, I think it was the other Christina, and she was saying, so we'd ask for their history, and they'd never shared it before. So they went back when I was one. But they had all these aches and pains because they'd never had a doctor who would listen and who was available. Just so many things that we take for granted. Loved ones. There was a guy who came in, and he's alone now because his mother, father, and brother were killed during the earthquake. And he had a sickness that would debilitate him for sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 days, and he'd be all by himself, and there was no one to take care of him. He said, I wouldn't even be able, if I didn't take the water with me before it hit, there'd be days when nobody would talk to me or know that I was incapacitated, and I couldn't even eat. And so, just so much to be thankful for. So when you sit down to that turkey or to that meal, and just tell God, thanks for being good to me. And I don't know why we get to have that and they don't. The other one, I throw one more word at you to be thankful for, because I felt this was missing in the culture. Hope. Hope that things would get better. And for a lot of those people that we were with this week, they don't have that. Their hope is, I hope I can survive another day or see next week. So just a lot to be thankful for. I also want to give a shout out. He just left for a little bit, but the guy who does our sound is a guy by the name of Scotty. Scotty actually was our landlord. We worked with him at the Rococo. He's traveled with us to the Bourbon, and now he's here and he helps us with sound. And if you see him around after the service, just tell him thanks. We appreciate you serving us. If you want, you have an outline. They're up on the counter. If you don't want them, that's okay. But they're really great if you to diddle on, to write a note to the person next to you and say, hey, we never want to go here again. Or you can put them, if you have a bird, they just catch stuff for you. But all the verses and stuff that we'll be referring to today are on the list, are on that outline as well. For the past few weeks, we've been looking at for answers to some hard questions of life. And I just want you to know, I'm going to share these questions, but because of the last week that I spent in Haiti, these questions are even a little bit more weighty for me to share. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? And more specifically, why do bad things happen to me? And we all have those things that we wish would go our way. And when you spend time in a third world culture, those things that we consider hardship and difficult or bad aren't so bad. We've said that these questions that we've been talking about and others like them actually flow from a larger question that all of us wrestle with throughout our lives. And the question is this. And again, I want you to put yourself in the context of Haitians. This question, if God is all good, and if God is all powerful, and if God is omniscient, that is, He has complete or unlimited awareness, knowledge and understanding, and is able to perceive all things, if God is good, including and all things happen, He is in control of, the past, present, future, then why is the world full of evil? So 2 weeks ago, we began to dialogue about this matter of a God who is good and the reality of evil. And it's hard to put those two together. The first thing we said is we talked about evil. We said evil is concrete. That is, we can't talk about evil in the abstract or the philosophical. We need to settle the matter and say that evil does exist. And so we need to have something that we put our hands on, that we can wrap our arms around. So we come to the conclusion, yes, evil does exist. And so what we did is we gave a concrete example of the reality of evil. We shared, and again, I just want to give us context as we start our dialogue. We talked about Zosha. Zosha was a 5-year-old girl who lived in Germany. Her father was a Jewish doctor. By the way, 2 of the people that I fell in love with this week and became good friends with, we've already traded some Facebook messages, was 2 Jewish doctors. Had the best time with Marty, who was 78 years old, and his son, Roger, and watching them as father-son operating together in Haiti was just really cool. But anyway, Zosha was a beautiful little 5-year-old girl whose father was a Jewish doctor, and they were there. She was maybe about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, when the Nazi regime took over the country. And her parent and Zosha's family was herded into a ghetto, and they lived there for a year, and then they cleared out the ghetto. You've seen this actually portrayed in the movie Schindler's List, the girl with the little red coat. It's an actual story. Zosha was in line waiting. They had been herded out of the ghetto. They were waiting to get on the train that would take them to the concentration camp. There were 2 German soldiers who saw her. She was beautiful, and she had beautiful eyes. And one soldier said to the other, "Did you see that little girl's eyes? They're like diamonds." And the other guy said, "Yes." And the first soldier said, "You know what? I could use a couple of diamonds. One for my girlfriend and one for me." They pulled that little 5-year-old beautiful girl away from her mother. And in front of witnesses and other Jews and soldiers, they took a knife and they cut her eyes out of a 5-year-old girl. Now, the reason we share that, it's a horrific story, is simply this. It's not to dramatize or bring an emotional level. It's to say what I think all of us would have said had we voted. That act was evil. I don't think we'd say it was bad or not nice or inappropriate or poor decisions. We would say that act itself was evil. And we didn't vote on it, but we'd all agree. That event was recorded by a guy by the name of Philip Friedman, who was an eyewitness to that horrific tragedy. And he noted, reflecting on it, that people cried out to God and prayed to God while it was occurring. And he wondered out loud, what would God hear that day? Would he hear the prayers of people pleading for him to intervene to stop this horrific thing? Or would God hear the laughter of the 2 soldiers because they laughed as they did this cruel deed? And we said the problem with evil that makes it so difficult to touch is that God heard both. And it seemed he did nothing. And that's the problem with evil. Now, we've been saying there are 2 ways to approach this matter of evil, and we're looking at just 2, and there's combinations, and these are maybe 2 extremes or 2 positions, and there's positions in between. But we want to state, and we said there's the traditional approach, perspective to evil, which says this: the mystery of evil is the mystery of the hidden purposes of God. And we quoted like Proverbs 25:2, where it says, "It is the glory of God to conceal the matter." From the traditional perspective, you'd say this: everything that happens, every circumstance, situation that involves choice and consequence, all of it is part of a divine plan. A person who embraces the traditional perspective, which I do much of the time, would quote this verse: "All things work together for the good of those who love God, who've been called according to His purpose." Which says, it doesn't say all things are good, and it doesn't eliminate evil. It just says God can take that and do something good from it. The thinking in this perspective is pretty straightforward, and that is this: God is omniscient or omnipresent. That means He is everywhere. And we see a text like Psalm 139:7 that says this. The psalmist says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" And he goes on to say, if I go to the heavens, you are there. If I go to the depths of the sea, you are there. If I rise up on the wings of the dawn, and I end up on the opposite side of the sea, you are there before I arrive. If I'm in the dark is as light as to you. You see me. And when I was created, even before I was created, you were in the womb there as well. In fact, you knew the days ordained before me, before they ever came to be. Again, he is everywhere. And he goes on to say, before I breathe, you were already there. And when I'm here, you're there. And when tomorrow comes, you're waiting for me, for you are there. So the bottom line is the omnipresent position says basically this: he is everywhere, and there isn't anywhere that he is not. So nothing gets by him. It's not like when the evil thing happened, it was like, oh, I was not on time, and God missed it. He was there. This position, traditional perspective would say God is omniscient, which he is. What's that? That means he knows everything that has happened in the past and will happen in the future. Again, God is not caught off guard. He is not surprised. God is omnipotent, sovereign. That means God has the power. He can do all things. There is nothing that God cannot do, including intervening on the behalf of a 5-year-old girl. A person who is traditional, and it's safe to assume this, that holds that position would probably conclude that if God doesn't stop it, it must be good that he doesn't stop it because God is all good. Do you see the rationale there? So whatever God does or doesn't do, he has a good reason for not doing so, not meaning that it is good in and of itself. Now that sounds philosophical and a little bit abstract. I hope I presented that well and said everything right. But the traditional perspective, and I've talked about sometimes where you have somebody, I think we had Jerry come up here sitting in a chair, and I was over him as God would be over us, and that nothing comes into our life that doesn't pass through his hands first. That's what the traditional perspective would be. I just wrote a few things in my notes this morning, because a traditional perspective would say everything is part of the divine plan. That's easier for us sitting here to embrace that. That would be very difficult had you been with me in Haiti this week. It would have been very difficult for you to say everything is part of God's divine plan and everything is good. God can take good from everything that occurs. If you had been in the ER room when they brought in this little baby with spina bifida, how old was that child? Did you get to see her? 3 days old. If I didn't see up close, but spina bifida is a degenerative or disease, something of the spine, and the growth was horrific, and the baby really has zero chance unless God intervenes. Even if we had the right specialist there, this baby was in trouble from the get-go. Where was God when that child was formed in the womb? We just read, when I was formed in the womb, you were there. Do you see how sometimes that can be hard to embrace? I just wrote down here a woman who came in who had difficulty standing up. And then when we found out from her x-rays, the reason she had difficulty standing up, it looked like her hip was out of socket. There was no socket because the cancer had eaten it away. I can't remember, I think she was 30-something-year-old. It would be hard to say, hey, God is in control, but you're going to die a horrific death. This is stage 4. We can do nothing for you. Nothing can be done no matter where we send you. And it's going to be a very slow and painful death. If that is you, you're not going to be saying, yes, God is here. You're going to be asking, where is God? All right? Another man who came in and needed a surgery done that we could not do because we didn't have a specialist. We had a urologist, a very gifted man, Andrew from Omaha, but he had to say, we can't operate on you. And he was told before he came to the clinic, he was early 20s, very sharp, very articulate. He was told, your only hope to survive what you got is this team that's coming in. And he asked me, will you just pray for last rites, and will you guys put me down? It was basically, yes, can you finish this? I'm going to die. I want to die now. Would you give me last rites? Okay? I could go through this list, but I think you get the point. Sometimes that traditional perspective, you're holding on to it saying, okay, God, I don't get this. This hurts. I'm trusting you. Even this, it doesn't make sense. I'm going to choose to believe in you when I don't see you in this. But there are times, if you're in that, you can't see God in any of it from the traditional perspective. The essence of evil from a traditional perspective is simply this: God is in control, and we're going to trust Him anyway. All right? But there's also another perspective that we introduced briefly 2 weeks ago called the warfare perspective. And a person from the warfare perspective would say it this way. They would say, yes, the mystery of evil is a mystery about the unfathomable, complex, war-torn creation. That when man chose to live life independent of God in the garden story and said, you said to live life this way, God, but we're going to live life this way, that we opened the door for evil to come in, and now evil and good at war with one another. Creation is no longer what it used to be. It's not a perfect place that has God's interaction with God on a daily, intimate basis where everything was good and controlled and laid out in the garden. Man chose to rebel, and that turned this creation upside down. And now a spiritual battle exists. From this perspective, when evil happens, it's not a mystery about God's character. It's a mystery about God's creation. A creation that is besieged by war. In this perspective, God gives humans and angels free will. What we do with this free will is about us. It's not about God. We have a free will. Our choices, our decisions have ripple effects. They don't impact us. They impact people's lives around us. And the complexity of all those decisions coming together make it impossible to trace any kind of intelligible explanation of why an accident happens and one person in the car is seatbelted in and they die. Maybe another person in the car is not seatbelted and it's thrown from the car and they survive. That's what I'm saying. It just, why that happens. I saw a show the other, not show, but a while back there was a plane crash and people were killed. And one person said, God was with me today. Now, if you're like me, you're going, did you just say that God was not with those people who got killed? You see what I'm saying? God was good to me today, but you see how that works out. It's hard to reconcile those kind of things. We could say it another way. The next slide, I think. The mystery of evil, the mystery of that, the mystery of all of that attaches itself to creation, not to the Creator. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you love to hunt. For the record, I don't hunt. But let's say that you love to hunt and you love to hunt quail. Okay? And let's say that one day, because you hunted quail, you created a gun. And for the record, I don't own a gun. Now, you created a specialty gun for the hunting of quail that takes quail into the equation for this gun. I mean, you know the typical flight pattern, the speed, the size of the shot as you want it, as it leaves the gun. So it's for quail. Now, by the way, I told you that I don't hunt, and it's not because I'm anti-hunting. I told you I don't own a gun. It's not because I'm anti-gun. This is not a PETA presentation about not killing quail, and it's not anti-gun, desire for anti-gun legislation. I just put that up front. I don't have a gun because I'm ADD and I'll shoot myself in the foot. Okay? Hey, don't! There goes the toe. That's why I don't have a gun. And there's another reason why my wife doesn't let me drive on the motorcycle. Hey, look at the pretty store, which would be my last words. So anyway, you created this gun to hunt quail, and the way you designed it took all those things in for quail, and this gun became a great seller. And one day somebody buys your gun, but in a fit of rage, they shoot and kill another person. You tracking with me? So here's the point. The murder of the other person, they don't bring you to trial and say, hey, you created this gun, this guy shot the guy, A equals B plus B equals C, A equals C, therefore you're guilty of shooting that guy. You'd say, well, that's about the stupidest thing I've heard, and that would be true. It wouldn't have to do with you at all who created the gun, it would have to do with the person who had the gun and pulled the trigger. Make sense? The ultimate explanation of why there's evil at all has to do with the free will that God has given us, and not with the fact that God gave us free will. And I submit to you this: every aspect of creation that doesn't reflect God's loving character ultimately comes from some will other than God. Okay? You might want to read that a couple of times. I came across this verse a couple weeks ago in my reading. It said this: "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice." Let's say that I took this stand and I walked over here to my twin, and I hit him over the head. Okay? I just smacked him over the head. And that act, that injury, caused irreversible brain damage, worse than was already there. And and I say that because Isaac is my friend, was my friend. And in the warfare perspective, I want you to say this: the question ought not to be, why did God allow Greg to smack, okay, Isaac in the head? Why did God give Greg the freedom to do that? Okay? But the question, okay, it wouldn't make sense for us to say, why did God want Isaac to have brain damage? That's not the right question. The explanation of why Isaac got hit in the head with the music stand also has, who made that stand? That was a bad thing. That's not the question. It's not with the person who made this music stand. It's not a matter of the issue of God. It's the issue of why did Greg do that. Does that make sense? I want to make sure you're clear on that. So I think you're all on board with this, so I'm not going to beat that horse anymore, or that agent. Now, by the way, we make a lot of fun of each other a lot. It's a good friend. Do you remember Paul Harvey? Some of us grew up with Paul Harvey, and he made famous this line, "Now you know the rest of the story." I want you to keep that phrase, "Now you know the rest of the story," in mind, because I want you to know that I think part of this whole problem of why evil exists and why we wrestle with it so is because there is more involved in all of this in this life than meets the naked eye. There is more to the story than we can comprehend with the infinite mind. And I want to give you two quick stories from the Old Testament and then one from the New. A verse from the New. The first story is from 2 Kings 6. Here's the context. Here's what's happening. There is the king of Aram, and he's the bad guy. Okay? And they're at war with Israel, God's people. And one day the king comes up with they're at war, and he comes up with this great strategy that he thinks will do Israel in, and they will win the war. And so he comes up with this plan that is fail-proof. They're going to bait Israel's army. Israel's going to go walk into an ambush. They will be able to have them from several different sides, and they will take Israel by surprise. He runs it by his executive committee and his leaders, and they go, "Oh, that is a great plan." So they break the huddle and they put the plan into motion. But God heard the plan, obviously, because he's everywhere, and he informs a guy by the name of Elisha. Elisha is a prophet for Israel, and Elisha goes and tells the king, "Hey, the king, King Abraham over there, has got this plan. It's a secret plan, but God told me the plan to tell you the plan, so it's no longer secret." And so he tells them the plan, and they avoid the ambush. Tracking with me? So the King Aram finds out, he's like beside himself, and so he gets his officials together, that huddle group, and he says, "Okay, what gives? I think we have them all. Somebody here ran it. Okay? Heads are going to roll. How did this happen? We got a traitor in our midst." His officials say this in verse 12. It's not us, okay? It's that prophet Elisha. Listen to this. He tells the king the very words you speak in your bedroom. Because he's everywhere. Okay? With that? And so he says, I love that phrase, which is a phrase that we should take into account. Because he's everywhere, all right? So the king is like, so the king comes up with another plan. but we won't talk about it in the bedroom. There's no intelligence there. He comes up with another plan, like God's not going to hear this one, okay? So maybe he went to the bathroom and that's really, God's not going to go in there. And so he devises another plan. This plan is, we're going to kidnap Elisha. This is a funny idea to me. God talks to Elisha. We'll tell Elisha, but God will hold this one out. I mean, he won't tell him. Just stupid stuff. And so they put together a new plan. They're going to capture Elisha. They're going to send Elisha. They know where he's at. They find out where he's at. They send this vast army to get him, all right? To get the job done. So, Elisha wakes up in the morning. He's a good man. He's a godly man. He's already got the Keurig going and his coffee hot. And he sends his servant, Elisha sends his servant out maybe to get water, we don't know, or to maybe wash the mule. And the servant goes outside and he looks up and he sees this huge army descending upon their little encampment, and he panics. I mean, he drops a bucket, he comes in, he says, we're done, it's over, we're going to die. Put the coffee down, big army, bad guys. And Elisha's like, dude, chill, okay? And he's like, no, you understand. It's this big army. We're surrounded. We're done. And then this is what Elijah says, okay? Elijah responds, don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Guy's like, looks in his coffee mug. Dude, what you drinking? Hey, army, you and me. Dude, it is done. So Elisha prays, this prayer, he says, O Lord, open his eyes so that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked around in the hills where the army is descending, and what he sees is this huge, vast army full of horses and chariots, and chariot is what we call a typo. Chariots of fire all around Elisha. Okay, so here's the point. I think you're seeing the rest of the story. The servant could only see and experience life on one level. He could only see what he could touch, and we could see and what he could hear, okay? And Elisha said, dude, you're not seeing the whole story. You're seeing life one-dimensional. So he prays. God opened his eyes so he can see this other thing that exists in this war-torn creation. And when God opens his eyes, he sees that there's a spiritual realm of which we know very, very little about. I wonder, I don't know how you respond, but if I was Elijah's servant, I'd be out there, yeah, bring it on, okay? Because now the scales have tipped. The servant could only see one dimension. Elijah was tuned into the fact there is more to this life than meets the eye. A spiritual dimension that we know little about. A spiritual dimension where the protection and power in the spiritual realm for those who God loves. Another story from the Old Testament, Daniel. Okay? This one is found in Daniel 10. Here's what's happening. Daniel's in a tough spot between a rock and a hard place. And he's not sure what step he is supposed to take now. And it's a tough predicament, so he decides, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to drink, I'm going to pray because I need God to speak to me. So for 3 weeks, he prays and fasts. For 21 days, he prays and he gets zero response. He is losing 21 to 0, okay? For 21 days, he prays out loud and God is silent. For 21 days, he calls God and he gets put on hold. All right? For 21 days, he knocks and no one's home. You got it? Some of us pray for like 5 minutes, we don't get a response. Okay, he's putting in some serious time here. And this is God's like star player. This isn't somebody who just kind of nominally into the faith thing. He's pretty committed. But for this prophet of God, for God's right-hand man to the nation of Israel at this time, God is silent. It's as if God has turned his back As if God does not care about, as if God is indifferent to the situation he is in. Son, I just want you to know, one might conclude, God's timing is always right. So God didn't will for the prophet to know until that time. As you see, that time does come. Some would say, well, he's praying, but he lacks faith. If he had, just a little bit more faith. Maybe you might conclude God did not answer his prayer because there's some secret sin in his life. And the Bible says, if I cherish sin in my heart, I think it's Psalm 66:18, if I cherish sin in my heart, God would not have heard my cry. Okay? So, all of those, by the way, responses would be this. Okay, wrong. So, after 21 days, an angel shows up, which I think would get my attention. But the angel shows up and says, do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God. That's why he put on sackcloth and ashes, and he prayed, and he didn't eat, and he's making this, I'm going to humble, and he was probably prostrate, where he lay down before God, he humbled himself, this is not selfish ambition, this is not self-motivated, he wants the wisdom of God. So ever since then, your words were heard from the very first day. And I have come in response to them. I'm sorry, I'm a good American. And so my responses would have been from the first day, like the first words, that is 21 days, do the math, 21 times 20, that's poor directions, no GPS for the angel flight, what's this? Did you oversleep? Or did you take ill? Was it a slow train? Did your chariot of fire overheat? Were you driving a Ford? Were you distracted? Are you ADD? You didn't take your medication? Dude, you will never get a job at Jimmy John's, that's for sure. Alright? The angel continues, verse 13. But the prince of the Persia kingdom resisted me 21 days. Okay? Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now this is an angel talking. Okay? You with me? This isn't like, I was coming down from Omaha and the road was closed. Okay? Or I got pulled over by the state patrol and was detained. This is a different element. Okay? This is like a whole different plane. So here's the thing. God hears the plan, dispatches an angel to answer the prayer, and on the way, he's intercepted by a principality. Okay? If you want to be specific, the angel runs head on into a demon. Oh, this is a weird church. Who blocked the way for the angel to make it to God's man. Now, again, I want to come back. Now you know the rest of the story. So something happens in the cosmos, in the spiritual dimension, on a level which Daniel, God's right-hand man, knew nothing about. And God opens his eyes. By the way, after delivering the message, the angel says, dude, would so love to stay. Would love tea and crumpet, because it was a British angel. But I got to get back, okay, because the Prince of Greece now is jumping into this huge thing that's happened in the cosmos, and we're about to, rumble, and I need to get back to be on the good guy's side for this kind of game war between the angels and the demons. Later, listen, that's kind of a bizarre thing, okay? Daniel has Prince of Persia, Greece, gang war, okay. But the bottom line is, the message he gets is, God heard your prayer. But there are other things going on in a realm that directly affects you. And we get held up. And if Daniel doesn't get the reason, maybe he would have gave up. We now, we would have no clue of why it took 24 days for Daniel to get an answer. But God, in these two little texts in the Old Testament, opens the door for what we sometimes could call a peekaboo of another thing that factors into the life that we live, a spiritual dimension. Something, if we're all honest, including me, we know very little about, and that we very few times take into account. When was the last time that you prayed for something and you really needed an answer, or something you were really up against it, or something seemed to be terribly wrong? When's the last time that you prayed and you didn't get a response, and immediately you thought, oh, there must be something happening in the spiritual dimension that's holding things up? And it's not your lack of faith or secret sin, or because today you just happen to tick God off, okay? But because of some spiritual interference in the angelic realm, there's something going on. It's an interesting thought. It's also bizarre. For us to want things put in a test tube, mathematical equations that we can work out on paper. For those of us that think we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and make things occur because of our own effort or our own intellect, taking into account that which we cannot see is a stretch for some of us, me included at times. But from those two texts, what we find out, now you know the rest of the story. Now from Ephesians 6, and we're done. We read this. Finally, be strong in the Lord, in the power of His might. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. I know I got a couple verses in there, I think. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Why don't you say that? Our struggle isn't here on this level. But it's against the powers of it's against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And again, I want you to understand. You understand that what we saw happen in those two Old Testament texts, and now what Paul is warning us about in Ephesians, there is about a 2,000, maybe 3,000 span of time that's occurred, and you have people on two that are centuries apart from another saying there is a different realm that exists. There's something more to this life than just what we see and what we feel and what we can control. He says this in verse 13, therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, and I love this, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. Now you know the rest of the story. There's more to this life than meets the eye, and there's stuff that goes around us that boggles, if not just confuses the mind. So what do you do with this? We got to bring this to a conclusion, and I know for some of you this is a stretch. I just want you to, it would be so easy to say, if you do this, this, and this, and this, it works out, okay? It would be so easy to say, this is how God works, and this is why it would be, and this is why this happens, and then you'd feel better. There's a lot of times I meet with people, and I say, this is da-da-da-da-da-da, what do you think? Beats me, okay? Well, you're the theologian, yeah, but I ain't God, okay? So what do you do with this? Well, if this is new to you, how about this? If this is new to you and you're really skeptical, I totally get that and I respect that. Okay? But maybe when we pray in mid, the prayer you need to pray is this, okay, God? You need to pray Elisha's prayer for yourself and say, okay, God, open my eyes that I may see. And by the way, maybe you have to put a dare out there. I dare you, God, to open my eyes that I may see. Help me to see that the spiritual realm exists. And maybe that has to be the prayer. Just open my eyes. Maybe you need to confess, I struggle with this whole issue of evil. I struggle with this one. I love Star Wars, but then, the Force and the dark side, it was a great movie. But maybe you need to say, you know, Lord, I struggle with evil. I struggle with its reality. I struggle, folks, I struggled this week emotionally on several levels. Seeing kids, these little kids in Haiti, who I'm just wondering what life holds for them. My kids, my grandkids will get more this Christmas individually than some of those kids will get in a lifetime. My kids will eat on Thanksgiving Day better than most of those kids will ever eat in a lifetime. Okay? I'm just saying, you see that. And you know what we do? You know what I was trying to, I worked so hard to do this. I was trying to somehow distance myself from having to deal with those questions while I was in Haiti. We struggle when we don't get our way. How about when nothing seems to go your way ever? I think sometimes when I pray, God, I don't understand this thing. I don't understand this mess. I definitely don't understand this spiritual dimension. I just can only deal with what I can understand. Boy, that's going to be fun for you. Like, why did I lose my child? Why did my dad or my mom die before their time? Why did she leave me? Why did I get cut from it? You're going to have all those kind of questions. Good luck always having a black and white answer where you go, no, I get it, because that just doesn't happen. And I don't mean to say that judgmentally or harshly. But maybe you need to pray, God, help me to trust you. Especially during the dark times, especially during the difficult times. And God, help me not to be so quick to blame you or somebody else when I don't get my way, when life happens and I don't understand it. Because life does happen. Disappointment comes. There's always going to be tragic trials and tribulations. That is part and parcel of this thing we call life. But the thing I want you to remember in all this is you're not alone. So here's the last verse, and I call it, and then we'll pray. Do I have this one? Do not be afraid. Did I give that to you? I'm a loser. But it's on your outline if you want this text, and I love this text. This is a text that I use a lot of times in the church. This is a text that I actually shared when I was just in Haiti. This is the hope. You're not alone. This is what God says to us. Do not be afraid. Especially for those of you who have given your life to Christ and said, God, I'm trusting you. Even when I don't get it. God says, do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name, you are mine. That 24-year-old guy just wanted to die. And by the way, he was a Christ follower. He said, why this happened? They tell me in broken English, why this happened? This is my only hope. I lost my mom, I lost my dad, I lost my brother. He's the one who says, when this hits me, I don't eat for days. There's nobody there, I am all alone. Why did God do that to me? Because I trust Him. He says, I trust Him. I gave my life to Him. I gave my life to Christ. And then why this? I just had to say, I don't know. And I know this is scary, but God has redeemed you. He knows you by name. He says, I called you by your name, you're mine. You are precious in my eyes. And because you are honored, I love you. And the mountains may move and the hills disappear. And things might not go the way you want. They might go incredibly wrong. But even then, my faithful love for you will remain. And my covenant of peace with you will not be broken. Here's the scoop, folks. If you haven't had difficult times yet, or you've distanced yourself, it's been a long time since something really hard has happened, here's the thing I want you to know. You need to live in the dark what you've learned in the light. And when in doubt, you just hold His hand and say, I trust you anyway. Let's pray. God, there's a lot of we opened up so many Pandora's box in this topic, and we only gave it two weeks to even address. The bottom line is, this evil, when there's evil, when there's tragedy, when there's hard things that happen, we want answers and we don't get them. And a lot of times we don't get them because either you conceal it Or because there's a realm of which we don't know much about. But either way, God, I pray that somewhere in that we're going to choose to trust you. Because life does happen. And our hearts do get broken. And in that, you still love us and embrace us. Help us to trust you when we don't get it. And help us to wrestle through it. There's not answers to some of these questions. There's only you. And in you there's hope. In the praise of Christ's name, amen.